Thanks, Ray. Good morning and half a day. It is now 9:04 in the morning, and this public hearing is called to order. In accordance with open government law, public notices of this hearing were sent out to all main media outlets, all senators and stakeholders on September 12th and September 17, 2018. I'd also like to recognize Senator Tom Atta and Senator Will Castro for being present. Thank you. Today's items for discussion for public consideration is Bill number 325-34, Bill number 337-34, and Bill number 338-34. We will first discuss Bill number 325-34. Bill number 325-34 was prompted by the Bill number 325-34 is introduced as an act to amend subsection 12.311 of Article 3, Chapter 12, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated relative to the 911 surcharge and the Enhanced 911 Emergency Reporting System Fund, and creating a criminal liability for violations of said article. If Bill number 325-34 is passed, it will do two things. It will allow complaints to be filed to the PUC if a person or persons believe that a violation has occurred with respect to the E911 fund, and would mandate that the Commission investigate and decide on said complaints. That is currently not the case as of today. The PUC possesses the sole discretion whether or not to investigate the matters pertaining to this bill. It will also allow for stronger penalties to include increased fines and possibly for the criminal penalty of imprisonment. This is also in accordance with the national statute, where they have fines and imprisonment if these funds were to be misused. So basically what we did was to ensure stricter regulations and to ensure that this money is used properly for the purpose that it is collected for, which is collected by the people of Guam. We wanted to make sure that it's enforced in that manner. Okay, so if anyone would like to give testimony on Bill number 325-34. Deputy Fire Chief.
Hafide, good morning, Senator Nelson, Senator Atta, Senator Castro. Thank you again for having this public hearing and allowing for testimony. As you know, I am the acting fire chief for the Guam Fire Department. I'm here to provide testimony on behalf of the Guam Fire Department. This testimony will be in support of Bill 325-34 and its intent to protect the Enhanced 911 Emergency Reporting System Fund. Bill 325-34 does not change very much the current status of the E911 Enforcement Law, 12 GCA Section 12311, other than to add a new section requiring the Guam Public Utilities Commission to investigate complaints and to restructure the penalty to change the amount calculation of the monetary fine. It further clarifies that violations are chargeable as a misdemeanor, which is imprisonment of 1 year or less. The current version of the law already says that violations can be sent to the AG's office for prosecution. So in a way, it is good that the bill clarifies the level of offense chargeable. However, I am concerned that depending on the circumstances of the complaint or alleged violations, 10 days may not be enough for the PUC to complete its investigation and findings. Page 2, line 18 to 20. Perhaps 30 to 60 days will be more realistic and will ensure that a thorough investigation process will be allowed. Most importantly, Bill 325-34 does not place any restrictions on the use of E911 funds by GFD for its intended purpose. On that note, I would like to point out and correct page 2, lines 9 and 10, with the statement that at no time was our ability to acquire or upgrade the system negatively impacted by the status of the E911 fund. First of all, the current system was well maintained and upgraded as necessary beyond its expected lifespan, increasing the return on investment made over 20 years ago. Secondly, I have testified against the increase of the dollar surcharge on multiple occasions because we have been able to operate well within the projected revenue collections and appropriations. Lastly, which I'm most proud of, we are taking a major step forward in the full replacement of the E911 system with the next generation 911 system. The announcement of the request for proposal is set for the end of this month. Therefore, for the sake of accuracy, I request that this citation be stricken from Bill 325-34. In closing, the Guam Fire Department and I will always remain available to continue this forward progress of our organization and its mission. And I'd like to take this opportunity to ask that we bring the same attention and effort towards our fees and fines update. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Deputy Fire Chief. Attorney Harecki.
Good morning, Senators Nelson, Castro, and Atta. I'm Fred Harecki, the Administrative Law Judge for Telecommunications and E911 matters at the Public Utilities Commission. I am presenting the testimony of our Chairman, Jeffrey C. Johnson, today. Essentially, the PUC does support the passage of this bill. You will remember that by statute, the PUC was the body that was empowered to implement the surcharge. And certainly it was the intent of the Commission that the funds that the ratepayers of landlines and CRMS pay be used for the purpose of fixing the E911 system. That is the statutory purpose, and that is what separates these funds from other government of Guam funds. These are ratepayer funds that are designed for a specific purpose. So for that reason, I believe the PUC is in accord with the intent of Bill 325. I would like to thank Fire Chief for bringing up the point about the 10 days, which Dr. Johnson did not mention in his testimony. Normally, the Commission meets once a month at the last Thursday of the month. So 10 days is a little brief because action on these probably could not be taken without a vote of the Commission. So 30 days at a minimum probably would be more appropriate. I did want to point out also that the Commission has already undertaken an investigation of the allegations concerning misexpenditure of funds, and that is ongoing now, and the Commission is carrying out its statutory duty to make sure that those funds are used for the proper purpose. There was one point about the statute, and that's 12 GCA section 12311, that we think needs some additional clarification. It is appropriate that persons could bring complaints to the Commission about E911, but the question is what kind of complaints? Right now, the law is pretty general. It says that a person who believes that a violation of the Act occurred could file a written complaint. We do have some concern that individuals might feel that operational issues about E911 are properly brought before us. For example, there was not a quick enough response to an emergency, or that funds were spent for the wrong kind of equipment, different operational issues. We think there should be some clarification that the kinds of complaints that the PUC would address are those relating to violations of a provision of the Act or an order of the PUC. And that tracks the same language that was used in the existing statute, which talks about the investigatory duties of the PUC. So in Dr. Johnson's testimony, he's presented some very slight modifications of that provision that he would request that the senators enact. The Commission has no objection to the other provisions of the bill. We think whether to implement criminal sanctions is certainly something within the jurisdiction of the legislature. a minor concern about proposed section 12311D. It does speak about the imposition of civil penalties or criminal penalties. We think it would be pretty clear that only the Attorney General's office can impose criminal penalties. But civil penalties, in some cases actually, that the PUC does have that authority with regard to telecom companies, but we would prefer that this provision really relate to the authority of the Attorney General's office and not the Public Utilities Commission. So in conclusion, the PUC is sympathetic to the desire of the legislature to ensure that E911 surcharge funds are used for the sole purpose of the operation and maintenance of the E911 system, the provision of enhanced E911 equipment, and the payment of system costs. With the proposed revisions, the PUC does support the enactment of Bill number 32534. Thank you for the consideration of this testimony.
Thank you, Attorney Harecki, and I'd like to add for the record that a letter from Jose S. Servino, PE, is in support of Bill 325, and his testimony will be added in the committee report. I'd like to open up any questions for anyone on the panel, and I'd also like to recognize Senator Muña.
Thank you very much. I just have some concerns on page 2 there. Of course, for the language, any person or persons, that leaves it open to anybody. I mean, so you know, as opposed to maybe the government official that has a custodial responsibility over these funds, like for example, the chief. And so I do have some concerns about just opening up. Otherwise, the PUC could very easily get bogged down, as you indicated. Well, you kind of clarify the part about the complaint about what, and you kind of clarified that and narrowed it down. The issue about, you know, any person, I don't know what would establish standing to do that. The other part so then that on line 16 there where we talk about any person or persons, then certainly that I think is kind of problematic. The other concern that I have, same page, line 17, is that the use of the permissive language may. Anybody who believes that a violation has occurred may file. And so, you know, it's as opposed to if I know I have a duty to be able, I have a duty to file a complaint or at least a notice to, and so I find that otherwise it's kind of like got no teeth. And so with that language, that with the belief I don't really have to file a complaint, then what would initiate an investigation by the commission? I mean, can the commission on its own volition undertake an investigation?
I believe it could. There are some cases the commission has instituted rate proceedings on its own volition, so probably I think it could.
But if there's been no petition for let's say an increase in the surcharge, or there's been no petition, how is the 911 funds, does that require appropriation by the legislature? Yes, it is. Yeah.
For the record, we appropriate the E911 funds. From my understanding it is collected through the PUC, moved to DOA, and the legislature appropriates E911 funds, which usually, mostly, since I've been here, goes directly into the Guam Fire Department. And then what happens with the allocation and where that money goes is the executive branch's ultimate decision.
Correct.
So that's basically the concern that I have with the language of the bill. Just those 2 lines. Any person can file it, and that can be a free for all. And then the permissive language on line 17, that he who has a belief may file, but it's not really required to.
We have some pretty broad language about complaints about utilities too, that any citizen that has a complaint basically can file complaints. It's not exercised that often, but it just depends on how broad the standing is intended to be. I don't think the PUC objects to a broad standing as long as we're clear about what the complaint is supposed to be about. But I understand your point.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Muñoz, do you have any questions? No? Okay. I'd like to thank for your testimonies on Bill 325-34. Essentially, this is really guided by a federal statute, and so there has been concerns with the FCC on how this money has been used and allocated, and so now we are introducing a bill to address some of those issues and perhaps deter those practices. Okay, the next item for discussion is Bill number 337-34, which is an act to amend subsection 3127 of Article 1, Chapter 3, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to mandating qualification requirements of the Director of Customs and Quarantine Agency. And then the next bill will be Bill number 338-34, which is an act to amend subsection 3113 of Article 1, Chapter 3, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to mandating qualification requirements of the Director of the Department of Corrections. Okay. Yes. Is there anyone? Okay. So, Senators, these 2 qualification requirements was brought to my attention during my time as the Oversight Chair for Public Safety, and really looking through the packets and seeing the qualifications that are required to lead these agencies does not give any room for experience within those agencies, within Customs and Quarantine or Department of Corrections. So really, these bills are meant to address some of the gaps that I feel perhaps should be addressed when we look at leadership to oversee our public safety agencies. There should be a time in service within that agency or something very like to the functions of the agency. So for Customs and Quarantine, perhaps you had a job in the federal government with the Customs and Quarantine Agency, then yes, that would suffice. But my concern was that we just brought appointees in without any background experience in these specific paramilitary organizations. And so if anyone would like to comment on these bills, or perhaps question.
Madam Chair, I certainly support Bill 337 in so far as the educational requirements and the background requirements that are being mandated. I'm happy to see that we're not limiting it to just individuals with experience in the customs enforcement agency, but also opens it up to others who may come from the outside of that institution, but certainly can demonstrate the executive management experience in a related field, and which has been outlined here: public administration, criminal justice, or law, or closely related field or discipline. And so I'm happy to see that we've kind of given that option. Otherwise, it's going to be a consistent. If without that last part of line 9 through 11, we're basically going to be promoting an inbreeding within the organization, and whatever we've done in the past 20 years is going to continue to be done in the next 20 years. But if we leave the opportunity for someone from the outside to come in, then certainly there's greater likelihood that change can be introduced into the organization for its progression. And so I certainly am in full support of the bill. Thank you.
Senator Muñoz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was hoping that we would at least have a panel that we can question here today, because I did have some questions in regards to this bill. I'm concerned about the age requirement. I'm not sure, Madam Chair, maybe if you can give me a little insight on the arrival of the 35 years of age, and if there's a specific reason for that age. That was one of my main questions.
Yes, so in that item, page 2, line 7, really, if you following it is line B, which is a requirement of no less than 15 years of progressive experience. And so really, we kind of went by, if you're 20, you would have the age of 35. But yes, we can, if there is an issue with age, we can make it maybe 33, or I'm sorry, 35 at the most. But
so basically, then it was just to allow the individual to have at least 15 years
Correct.
of experience. Okay.
Correct, yes.
Okay. I think that's it for now. If I have any other questions.
Thank you, Senator Muñoz. Senator Castro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I commend you. I really appreciate you stepping forward to establish a minimum, at least a baseline for qualifications for this position, and I guess in another bill for another position. I support the intent. I was really hoping, like the previous speaker, that we would have a representative that can help me frame or provide the proper context as to what the baseline is for other positions. And so maybe we can carry on this discussion in a follow-up meeting, maybe in your office or with the Department of Administration. The other thing I think that I do appreciate about this draft, about the bill as introduced, is how you're providing a retreat. I don't know if it's, for the lack of a better phrase, a retreat provision. So the ability of a classified employee to retreat back to the position, the classified position once held. I think in other circles of employment, this is a good practice. I just want to, and maybe explore this with you further, to be careful about maybe making the barrier to entry a little too high. I've seen examples where some of the qualifications were established at a really high level, but it wasn't really reflective. I don't think it even correlated to effective leadership. So this is not to say I don't support the bill as written. I just maybe want to take a good look and a more in-depth look and a deeper discussion with DOA to determine what that baseline looks across the board, make sure we're not cutting people out who have the ability to lead, but like you intend, with a minimum set of qualifications. So those are my only points that I want to bring for the record, and I want to work with you on this. So thank you, Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Senator Castro. We have the Director of Corrections, Senator Lamarena. Would you like to comment on Bill number 338? The qualifications for the Department of Corrections Director. I'd also like to add that these bills, the effective date, should they pass into law, will be in January 1st, 2019. So it gives the current administration an opportunity to continue their operations.
Good morning, Senator, Senator Ada, Senator Castro, Senator Lee, Senator Muñoz. My name is Tony Lamarena, Director of the Department of Corrections. I'm going to go back in history and prior legislatures in public safety. I know in prior legislatures the deputy position was primarily the highest ranking position, uniform position within the department, and those were classified positions. With the police department, it's the colonel. With the fire department is the acting chief, fire chief. With customs, it's the chief of customs. And primarily because the legislature during that time wanted to ensure continuity among the uniformed services. Directors come and go. They're appointed by the administration and then confirmed by the legislature. So to ensure that there's continuity among the ranks, the deputy position at each of these departments became classified. You see Assistant Chief Joey St. Nicholas. You see in the police, and you see Vince Paris in customs. And with the understanding that the directors were appointed by the administration, gave them that flexibility. I'm not necessarily against or in favor of the legislation today. It's just that when we look at DOC is very different from various other public safety departments. I tell you, it was an eye-opener for me when I took over DOC 2.5 years ago. You're a mayor. You're running a city is primarily what you're doing. You have to feed them. You have to make sure they get the necessary medical care. You have to make sure they get the necessary behavioral health care. You have to make sure they get the necessary rehabilitation programs. So it's not just necessary public safety. I work very closely with the warden. He's my public safety guy. As a matter of fact, on the first day of my office, when I came into office, I told the warden, the correctional facility is your house, the administrative side is my house. And we worked very well together. He handled all the correctional officer issues. We worked together collaboratively to see how I could help him administratively. So DOC is very different. And I think if we're going to pass this legislation, which is fine, which requires all the necessary requirements. And I'll tell you right now, though, with the requirements, and I can see it's consistent with the police chief. But if we're going to do this, we're going to have a very limited pool of whoever the next governor is going to be. Because currently, right now, I can only think of maybe 2, maybe 3 people that will qualify under these qualifications. Okay? And if you're going to bring someone in from off island, you know, you have to remember, DOC, we deal with a complexity of issues. An enormous amount of different cultures are at DOC. If you bring someone in from off island, they don't really understand the cultures and the complexities of operating a facility such as the Department of Corrections. If the legislature were to pass this, my recommendation then is to make the deputy director position a classified position and make that deputy director have the equal capacity in regards to administrative. They should be aware of contracts. They should know how to deal with rehabilitation. If you're going to let the director handle safety and security, you need to provide that director the tools to operate the facility outside of safety and security. You know, I work with food service. I make sure that, you know, I deal with the dietitians. I look at the monthly menus. I work, you know, RFPs. I mean, there are just a lot of administrative work. Rehabilitation. You know, we went on and worked. I went to work with CAHA to get grants. I worked with other departments, collaborated with other departments to get rehabilitation programs working, other agencies and so forth. So, you know, working with behavioral health, working with GMH to make sure the clinic is provided. So if we're going to do this, you know, because every department has a classified deputy. GPD's got one, Customs got one, but theirs are geared more toward the uniformed services to ensure. If we're going to now require the director of Department of Corrections to be 15 years, have a degree in something related to criminal justice, or that individual needs a right-hand person that knows administrative work, that knows how to do budgets, that knows how to present budgets, that knows how to work with BBMR and DOA, do RFPs and contracts, bid specs. If you're going to require this of the director, on top of requiring them to have all this safety and security expertise, you're gonna exhaust this director. So unlike the other agencies where your number 2 man has background in, be it customs and quarantine or GPD or fire, I think you need a deputy at DOC that can augment the director's public safety expertise. So I think maybe in addition to setting these qualifications is also to establish a deputy director's position that is classified, just like all the other public safety departments. You know, like I said, you've got Vince Paris at Customs, you've got the captain, the colonel at the GPD, you have Joey St. Nicholas currently over at Fire. So you need someone that's going to assist the director in the administrative side of the house. And so, that would be my recommendation. I have nothing against, the legislation, but if you're going to pass this legislation, you got to make sure that you don't just put this individual at DOC and expect them to know how to handle procurement, or know how to handle rehabilitation programs, how to deal with various agencies and apply for grants. This is an administrator's job. So, I just ask the senators that when you look at this legislation, that you also provide the expertise for the director to succeed. I tell you, anyone that takes this job at DOC, I can never say anything bad about any prior directors at DOC because it's the toughest job that actually you love. I mean, I enjoy my work at DOC. When I see corrections officers and the work that they do and how proud they are of the work that they do, when I see inmates who graduate from RSAT program, who get jobs, that we help them get jobs that when they get out, they're employed. I mean, that's the satisfaction of this job. Are there going to be incidents at DOC? Of course there are. Google any prison in the United States, and there's going to be assaults, there's going to be attacks on officers, there's going to be riots. You're dealing with criminals who are incarcerated in 1 mile, square foot mile. Currently, we have 608 in our population as of this morning. You are going to get individuals get into arguments. Heck, we have fights in schools. What makes a fight in a correctional facility alarming? But the reality is whoever the next director is, I want them to succeed. But you need to provide them the necessary tools. And I think the way to do it is to create, along with this legislation, add on to this legislation, that we create a classified deputy's position and put down the requirements and qualifications necessary to help them, the director, administratively. Because that's probably one of the toughest things. You get a guy whose expertise is in public safety, and then for them now to realize that, my deputy now is Jim McDonald. When Jim first came in, the first week, he was so amazed about the extensive work that we do at DOC. He didn't know that I had to meet with a dietitian. He didn't know I had to meet with GMH and behavioral health and all these other entities that keep DOC going. So, again, senators, I know you want to help DOC by making sure that you have the best qualified director, but you need to also provide them the best qualified deputy and the tools necessary to make DOC succeed. So my recommendation is to create a classified position for the deputy director's position and put the qualifications down for an individual who has budget background, who has administrative background, so that that individual can augment the director who is top heavy with safety and security. I mean, that's the way it's really got to work. You know, when I went there, I had everyone with safety and security. I mean, I came on board and I was basically the administrator, and we worked well together. We actually worked well together. I mean, you know, I'm the type of guy that I collaborate with everybody. So, you know, again, like I said, I'm not against this legislation because it does put someone who's going to be qualified, but you got to provide that director with the necessary tools to succeed.
Thank you, Director Lemmer, and I'd like to recognize Senator Lee. Thank you for attending, and I'd like to open it up for the panel if anyone has any questions. Senator Ada.
Thank you. Senator Lamoureux, I think you've brought up some very valid points. One, the fact that DOC is really the only public safety related institution that does not have a classified deputy.
Right.
The same way fire does, GPD, and customs. And so that is probably an area that needs to be looked at so that we establish what you were suggesting. You indicated that putting these requirements for the director will narrow the pool, but at that point, I think I would kind of beg to differ because on line 11 of the bill, it does provide, you know, an alternative or equivalent executive management experience in the field of public administration, corrections, criminal justice, or closely related field. Maybe the only suggestion I would make there is that in lieu of that the director has to be 35 years of age, is that really maybe, you know, because the guy is only 30 years old,
Yeah.
but if he can demonstrate that he's had the 18 years of executive management experience, and he was able to get that, he was in the right place at the right time and was able to get those opportunities, that would probably be more a recipe for success than the mere fact that he has endured 35 years of age. And that, of course, was raised by my other colleague earlier, asking about what's so magic about 35 years. But otherwise, I appreciate your input.
Senator, I think that 35 is consistent with GPDs. GPDs also says 35. So, and I agree with you because, you know, you and I have entered government many years ago, and I know what my first directorship, I was not even 35. I just hit 30 in my first directorship, and I don't know if you were 35 even. Were you 35 when you got your first directorship?
Sometimes it's being in the right place at the right time.
So, yeah, I agree with you that do we limit ourselves by putting that age limit?
Senator Muñoz. Thank you, Senator Ada.
Thank you, Director. First of all, I just want to commend you because you've been doing a great job over at DOC. I want to commend you for that, first of all. And I understand that that all of the things that are coming to light in regards to DOC is not so much that there's more now, it's just now we're catching them more, right?
Yeah.
My question for you, and I understand the Chair, the intent of this bill, you don't want to send a leader into a war if they don't have training for the war, right? So I understand that point, but I'm just wondering, in your capacity, because you've been doing such a great job there, that if you had some of these qualifications, like Criminal Justice Academy, would that have made you a better leader at DOC? So that's one of my questions there.
Yeah, I tell you, I've run numerous agencies in the government of Guam in the last 30 years. And every agency is different. DOC was different. One, I've never run a paramilitary organization before in my life. But in regards to safety and security, you relied heavily on your operations manager, which is Captain Kittigwen, and your warden, and also Captain Uggan. And so they, again, you work very closely with them, and really, those are your key areas. Again, like I said, I have nothing against the qualifications for the director's position. It's just that, we need to provide that director the necessary tools, and we need to look at it, because there is no classified deputy position, unlike the other public safety departments. But make the deputy director's position more administrative requirements versus safety and security. Because you've already got the warden, now you've got the director, who are both highly qualified in public safety. So you need someone now that's more administrative to assist the director in the administrative process.
I understand that they do have to have that administrative expertise, but also on an executive level too. I believe that that person has to be able to lead, whether or not they know the ins and outs and the particulars of what it is that they're leading. They have to be able to lead the people that's their subordinates.
Yeah.
And so I truly believe that you've been doing such a great job, which is one of the reasons why I'm a little bit concerned about over-qualifying this position and not being able to find the right person for the job, such as yourself. So I just want to commend you for that.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I can see that primarily this legislation is consistent with GPD's. It's actually almost word for word with GPD's legislation. I agree with Senator Ada. Why is it 35? If you're going to do that, then I think you should also change GPD's age requirement as well. But in regards to DOC, like I said, it's a very different public safety department from any other department, other public safety department. And we incarcerate people. I tease my friends who are in the tourism industry that I run a hotel. And our capacity is 150% every day. Because really, in reality, that's what we are. We're a city. I house them. I have to make sure, these individuals' rights are cared for. They take me to court if their civil rights are violated. I need to make sure that they're medically cared for. I need to make sure we provide the best mental health care for them, food, and rehabilitation services that we provide. So it's more than just the public safety aspect. It's almost like being a city mayor, being a city manager. And that's why I say that you need to arm the director with a deputy who is well versed in how the functions of administration versus on public safety, because now you have a collaboration between the deputy who is more administrative and the director who is more public safety, and it just works better for them. It was an honor for me to work at DOC. It was probably the hardest job I love. Not to slight any of the other departments and all the employees I've worked with. I mean, all the agencies I've worked with were great. But I tell you that the dedication of the corrections officers and everyone that works at DOC, they deserve nothing but the best. And it's one reason I fight for them as hard as I do. Because DOC is probably one of the public safety agencies that have long been, for lack of a better word, the bastard child. We really need to ensure the safety of the corrections officers and all the staff there at DOC, and provide them, the necessary funding that they need to operate.
Thank you, Director Lamarena, for your testimony, and thank you for sharing some of the challenges that you've had as the Director of Department of Corrections. I'd also like to acknowledge the work that you have done at DOC, and also those that support you, your teams that are involved in recidivism and rehabilitative care, your administrative officers that help with the procurement and logistics piece, and also the correction officers who every day serve our island by ensuring that our safety is protected. I'd also at this time like to thank Guam Fire Department and Customs Quarantine Agency for their hard work that they do, ensuring that our island is safe. If there's any other questions, I'd like to adjourn this public hearing. We have exhausted everything that is on today's agenda. It is now 9:48 a.m. Thank you and have a good day. God bless.
Thank you.